Aloha and welcome to this quick screencast about the Twitter Bootstrap grid system, and I'm calling this Twitter Bootstrap grids for beginners, for absolute beginners with Twitter Bootstrap 3. You could also call this bootstrapping Twitter Bootstrap grids if you wanted to pun on it. And basically Twitter Bootstrap grids are very sophisticated. You could do lots of things, but to get started, the easiest thing to do is think of the following very simple use case, okay, which applies to most websites out there. You want n rows of content on your page, and then within a particular row, you're going to want some other number of columns, okay? And in fact, let's just, for the sake of simplification, say all of those columns are going to be equally spaced within the row. Finally, because Twitter Bootstrap is mobile first, what we want is, if the screen size is too small to show our M columns, then we just want it to be single column, or as Twitter Bootstrap calls it, a stacked display. Okay? So for each row of content on your page, there's basically two layouts that you're going to define. One is the normal multi-column layout, which is kind of the general case, and then if the screen size is too small, it's going to be single column. Okay? If we are content with this particular simplification of the layout, it's super easy to do. And that's what I want to show you in this screencast. So the way you do this is basically you decide what is the smallest screen that can comfortably accommodate whatever your multi-column layout is. Okay? So and you're going to make four choices. If actually your multi-column layout is tiny little icons that will always fit in whatever display you have, then the normal layout will be XS, and that means actually there'll never be a single column layout. You just have multi-column all the time. Typically that's not the case. So then it's going to be either if your layout is the smallest screen size is at least 768, you'd pick small. If the smallest screen size is 992 or laptop style, then you'd pick MD, and then they have this other size for large cinema displays, but we're not going to, in general, what you'll pick, again to simplify the use case, you're either going to say this is a layout that's going to fit on tablets or bigger, or it's a layout that's going to fit on laptops or bigger. Okay, and so you're going to pick either small, if it's the case that tablets and bigger will fit your multi-column layout. You'll pick MD if laptops or bigger will fit your layout. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. That's the key thing. And generally, really generally, it's probably going to be small. But anyway, once you've picked SM or MD, possibly LG, possibly XS, then that determines what call classes you're going to use. And so there's a whole lot of different call classes, but it's basically the COL dash and then the screen size, which is going to be XS, SM, MD, or LG, and then a number between 1 and 12. Okay? So in general, we're going to pick either small or medium because it's either going to need a tablet or bigger, or it's going to need a laptop or bigger for our default multi-column display. And that's going to leave us with one of these two sets of column classes, either the MD column classes or the small column classes. The only other thing you really need to know is that Bootstrap defines a 12-column grid. It's actually a fluid grid. We'll get to that in a second. And so the only thing you really need to understand about that is that when you're creating, dividing up your content into the column areas, you've got to make sure that within a row, the numbers at the end of your column classes sum to 12. Okay, so here's an example of a correct one at the top of the screen where I have two call small sixes. They sum to 12, so that means it's going to divide, the layout is going to be divided into two columns, okay? Because we basically got 12, it's a 12-column grid. The first 6 is the first column, the second 6 is the second column, so we got the whole thing, okay? An incorrect example of a layout would be to say here, the second one where we put COL small 3 twice, that only adds up to 6, and we need it to add up to 12. Okay, so you can't do that one on the bottom and get predictable results. Okay, so here's an example 2-column layout. We're using the small column selector, which means that it's going to be single column up to 767 pixels, and then starting basically a tablet size and above, we're going to get our 2-column layout. Okay? Here's an example of a 4-column layout. Okay, you can see it's 4 columns, and we know that because there's 4 divs within our row, and you know, because we have 4 columns, 12 divided by 4 is 3, so you can see 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 sums to 12. We've got a valid column layout, and because we're using the MD selector, that means it's going to be single column up to 991 pixels, which is kind of our laptop basic size, and then, you know, from then on we're going to get our actual 4-column layout. Okay, here's an A-column layout. Okay, this is, you know, kind of fun because of the fact that you can't use 12. You know, we have this 12-column grid, and we want to have 8 columns, but there's no convenient selector for, you know, 12 divided by 8. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, the way you do that is you can nest things. So what you see here is we have 2 divs containing the col MD6. Okay, there's the one at the top and the one at the bottom. That divides our row into 2 equally sized pieces. Now within those 2 equally sized pieces, we've got another 12-column grid, okay, that we can divide up any way we want. So we see within our 2 6-column classes, we've got 4 medium column classes, each with 3. So again, it, you know, adds up to 12. Okay, so in this case, because we're using the medium selector, it's going to be single column up to about laptop size, which is 991 pixels, and then it will go into this 8-column layout as soon as we get to laptop size. All right, and now you can see that, in fact, even though we've only got 12 columns, by doing this nesting trick, we can get basically any even-sized column that we want. I guess there's probably some maximum, but I don't know what it is. Certainly enough for whatever you want to do. Hard to get certain odd column sizes, right? You know, you can get 3-column pretty easy. I don't really know how you do 5 or, you know, 7 or something like that. But, you know, hopefully for most cases you don't want those prime number column layouts. Okay, final hints for this. The way Twitter Bootstrap wants things to be when you're using this column thing is everything's inside a container, and then inside your container you've got a row, and then inside your row is where you have these column dividers. And the second thing is, of course, this is a very simplified use case just to get you going, and that the Twitter Bootstrap grid system is, you know, far more complicated, as you'll see as you read the documentation, and if you want to do more complicated things, you probably can.